Hi, welcome to Christadelphianvideo.org. Thoughts on the Bible readings 2 Samuel 23, Jeremiah 26, Romans 15, 16. For August 5th, what a magnificent chapter we have in the 23rd chapter of 2 Samuel. It records the final words of David in thanksgiving and acknowledgement of the blessings of Yahweh. In verse 2 we are told that he was raised on high, indeed so, from shepherd boy to king, from a frail and failing individual to the recipient of great and precious promises, and one who was to be the forebearer of Messiah, whom he portrayed in type when he sat in the presence of the Almighty. 2 Samuel 7. He wrote of the Messiah, the sweet theme of Israel's Psalms. It was the God and Rock of Israel who spoke through David. The one who rules over men, i.e. Messiah, must be just, ruling in awe of God. David acknowledged that he and his descendants failed to live up to these words, but the Christ, who would be crucified, v7, would and he would, v6, deal with wickedness in all its forms. The balance of the chapter fittingly deals with David's mighty men and their exploits. David as mighty warrior king the El Gibber, Isaiah 9 verses 6 to 7, who would vanquish sin and death, see Isaiah 9 verses 6 to 7. He and his saints make war in righteousness against the enemies of their Almighty Father. Revelation 19 verses 11-16. In Jeremiah 26 we are told of the death threats made against Jeremiah and his deliverance from those who sought his life. Jeremiah is commanded to stand in the courts of the temple and call upon all the citizens of Judah to amend their ways and avert the planned judgments. The prophet is told that the nation will fail to heed those warnings. Yahweh invites Judah to consider the lessons of history. The Almighty had destroyed the center of his worship at Shiloh because of the nation's wickedness. Verses 7 to 9 tell us that the leaders surround Jeremiah and threaten to kill him. Verses 10 to 11 tell us that officers came from the king's house to the temple to investigate the charges against the prophet. In verses 10 to 15 Jeremiah defends himself against the charges leveled and repeats Yahweh's plea for Judah to amend her ways. The prophet warns these rulers that the Lord will hold them accountable for the way they treat him. Verses 16 to 19 tell of the division of thought that the rulers had concerning Jeremiah. The reasonable rulers considered Micah's influence on King Hezekiah, spoken of in Micah 3 verses 9-12, to eagerly pursue mighty reforms in order to save Jerusalem from its eventual doom in AD 135 when the Roman Emperor Hadrian commanded the plowing Jerusalem's fields and sowing them with salt. Verses 20 to 22 speak of the king and his warriors' intent to put the prophet to death. However, Uriah the priest protected the prophet. The king hunted down Uriah, capturing the priest in Egypt and slaying him. The chapter concludes with Jeremiah's hopes, contains the hopes and the pleas he made to the vacillating monarch. Zedekiah. The prophet had sought to persuade the king and his officials to ceasing to be recalcitrant rulers. Had Jeremiah achieved that, he may have been able to avert a similar destruction to that had been brought upon Shiloh, where once the Almighty's name dwelt and for a time had been reverenced. The chapter concludes with Shaphan the scribe's protection of Jeremiah from the people who wanted him dead. In Romans 15 verses 4 to 6 we are told the purpose of the scriptures: whatever has been written has been recorded for us to learn endurance and comfort. Particularly note that we are told that it was firstly recorded for the purpose of the Christ. Verses 8 to 13 should be read slowly and allowed to understand that all Scripture has been written to instruct us in the ways of patience and in a faithful walk before our God. Verses 14 to 21 speaks of God's will to save the Gentiles and for them to become obedient to the gospel on the basis of their faith. It allowed him to serve all who would be the recipients of salvation, starting with God's chosen people. Verse smiling face with sunglasses and flowing through to the Gentiles, verses 9 to 12, to whom Paul was the minister of revelation. The apostle outlines future travel plans, God willing, and the Lord's purpose for the God of peace to bring his children peace. The apostle prays that the God of peace may protect them. Chapter 16 verses 1 to 16 contains a list of faithful saints and fellow helpers in the furtherance of the gospel. How important it is to do whatever we can in advancing God's saving message to a perishing world. How great is our frequent need of friends to stand by us and encourage us to patiently continue in well-doing. The letter concludes with a promise from the Almighty to crush the perpetual persecutors of the saints, Rome the great Satan, in verse 20. The purpose of the letter concludes in a wonderful prayer of praise whereby God is extolled, and the intent of the letter and Paul's great commission to preach among the Gentiles the justification by faith that all may become obedient to the gospel of God. More here. https://christadelphianvideo.org/christadelphian-daily-readings